Shalom Uvracha of Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. This evening, we study together the Haftarah of Parshat Chukat, the Torah section of this week. And the Haftarah is taken from the 11th chapter of the book of Judges. Perek Yud Aleph of Sefer Shofatim. And I find the story that's discussed in chapter 11, which is the Haftarah of the Shabbat, to be fascinating. It tells us of a certain man named Yiftach, who was rejected by the people of his family and rejected by his community. And he also had problems in his background. He wasn't really part of the regular family. And when he grew up, and the members of the family grew, and they realized that he doesn't belong here. So we read in sentence 2 that they actually ostracized. They ostracized Yiftach. They drove him out of his house. I'm reading chapter 11, verse 2. Vayigdelu b'nei ha'isha vayigarshu et Yiftach. They chase him out of the house, out of the community. Vayomru lo tinchal b'beit avinu. Forget it. You have no future in this house. You will not inherit in the house of our father. Ki ben isha heret. Yeah, you're from a different. Maybe you're from a concubine. You don't belong with the family. And fascinatingly, as time goes on, when the people of Gilad, when the members of the community realize that they're being attacked by an enemy, specifically in the case of our Haftarah, it's the enemy of the Ammon nation. Vayilahamu b'nei Ammon im Yisrael, and they look around. Who's going to be the leader? Who is the proper leader of the Jewish? Who will lead the Jews? And there's only one man who seems to be eligible, and his name is Yiftach. Right? And so, in sentence 5, we read that when it becomes evident that they're under great duress and pressure, Vayelchu ziknei Gilad lakachat et Yiftach. They go to try to convince Yiftach to be their leader. Sentence 6, please come with us, and you will be the leader. You'll fight the people of Ammon. Just read with me sentence 7. It's so beautiful and so pathetic and so applicable to who knows how many situations in life. Yiftach says to the elders of Gilad, "You're coming to me. You're asking me to be your leader. You hate me. You drove me out. Halo atem sneitem oti." It's a strong word, right? Sneitem oti. You despised me. You hated me. You drove me away. Vatigarashuni mi beit avi. You chased me out of the house of my own father. Umadua batem elai atta kasher tsar lachem. Why is it that you come to me now when you really, need me? And I'd like to suggest that the story of Yiftach is not a one-time story. No story in Tanakh is a one-time story. Anyone who reads Tanakh is once upon a time there was a man named Jephthah. That's right. There was a man named Jephthah, and in a certain particular a context, the following. Yeah, that's one way of reading it. But that's not the way we read Tanakh. I believe, and I've seen in my life, so many situations where people have looked down upon a certain person, maybe because of his or her background, maybe because of his or her levels of achievement, maybe because of their sociability, whatever reason. I've seen it. And at certain points, when things get tough, and when they realize, oh, maybe that is the person. Maybe that really is the person who could make all the difference. And then they go, and they turn to that person, they say, could you be our leader? I saw this when I lived in the United States. I saw this in Eretz Yisrael. I see it all the time, right? Halo atem sneitem. You don't like me. So if you don't like me, what are you coming to me now for? And there are certain people who condemn certain practices of certain people, And then when it goes rough for them, and they realize, well, maybe this is the only person who really can help them, they turn to that very person that they were mocking. How many times in life do we cast away people? How many times in life do we look down upon certain people, not realizing that that very person may be the source of our salvation? You know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose Yiftach in our story. Yiftach is one of the leaders of the Jewish people, is one of the judges. Now, Yiftach is identified. There are problems with Yiftach. The rabbis speak about the level of his scholarship and the level of his. There are discussions about is Yiftach, who was Yiftach. But Yiftach is the leader. Yiftach is the leader, and the rabbis say, if he is the leader, then he has to be respected as the leader. And even if he's not on the level, let's say, of the generation, in the generation where Shmuel was the leader, so Shmuel is the leader. The generation where Yiftach is the leader, he's the leader, he's the judge. Yiftach b'torah, Shmuel b'torah. And whenever I read the 11th chapter of Judges, I always read it together with the teaching of Ben Azai. Ben Azai in the 4th chapter of the Ethics of the Fathers, Ben Azai teaches, Al tihi baz l'chol adam. Don't be scornful of anybody. Don't take anyone and make them marginal. Don't think like that. This person, they really can't count. She'ein lecha adam, she'ein lo sha'ah. Because every single person has his or her hour. The one that today you're casting away as being insignificant, tomorrow can be the most significant person in your life. And this message of the story of the elders of Gilad repeats itself over and over and over and over again in history. There are so many people who have been dismissed from schools. Not long ago I heard a story about somebody who was thrown out from many yeshivot. A great achievement, right? thrown out of many schools, right? But the way I heard the story, and I think it's a true story, was there was one yeshiva where the head rabbi of that yeshiva, may he be blessed, when he came into the school, he said to him, "Okay, your problems are over. Your problems are over. You have now entered the yeshiva, and we will keep you in. We will view you in the highest regard. You will not be thrown out of this yeshiva." That's what he told them immediately, And if anybody has any issues, tell them to speak to me. And he made it through the system in that yeshiva. And now we do fast forward. I don't know how many years later. Let's say 20 years later. Now one of the most prominent, wealthy business people in the United States. And there are many schools who need many yeshiva. Probably every yeshiva needs donations and support, and they all frequent this man's office. And I don't know if he uses the word from I don't know if he quotes Judges chapter 11, but more or less that's what he tells them. Hello, atem sneitem oti, but the garshuni, right? You hated me. You said, "Get out of my yeshiva. You don't belong here. You're not deserving of studying in our institution." Okay, I'm not deserving. So where does he give all his money? This one particular yeshiva. Millions and millions of dollars. He gives one yeshiva because that's the yeshiva that had faith in him. And maybe he wasn't on the level of the other students, but maybe the message of Yiftach is the message of Ben Azai. Al tihi baz l'chol adam. You don't know who you're dealing with. Even if you have a criticism of Yiftach, we just throw him out. Where are you throwing him to? Where's he supposed to go? Where? Vayivrach Yiftach mipnei achav. Vayivrach Yiftach mipnei, they had to run away. He was a fugitive. And this fugitive, who was cast away by his family, cast away by his community, is the leader of the Jewish people. The next time you're about to throw someone out of your institution, someone out of your community, someone out of your read chapter 11 of Judges. Study the Haftarah of Parshat Chukat, because maybe one of the secrets of the world is that which we learn in the book of Tehillim. Even ma'asu habonim hayita l'rosh pinah. It is that very stone that was despised by all the builders, who became the most important stone of all, became the cornerstone. There are many different ways of reading it. Maybe it's a reference to King David. Maybe David HaMelech was talking about himself, and then, you know how belittled David was. You know how belittled the status of David was and his family. The young one, the youngest one. Od Sha'ar HaKatan. He's the most insignificant in the family, or maybe his whole status is questionable because of his background. And he's going to fit the shoes of fighting, the strongest enemy, or perhaps according to certain interpretation, that's the story. That's the story of the Jewish people. We are all the member of this nation of Even Ma'asu Habonim. So many nations in the world cast us away. So many nations in the world hated us. So many nations in the world felt that we were marginal to what they wanted to do. The day will come. Maybe it's already happening. When they come and they say, could you please help us? Could you please lead us? L'cha v'hayita lanu l'katzin. In the period of the redemption, the Jewish people will be teaching the whole world, as we learned in Isaiah, as we learned in Micah, as we learned in other prophets. And maybe inside the Jewish people will say to the nations, or some of the nations that turn to them and say, you're coming to us? You want instruction from us? You're coming to Yerushalayim to learn? Hello, atem stay temoti. You hate us, don't you? Maybe the message of Yiftach is, be a little bit more deliberate in your judgment. Be a little bit more respectful, even of those people who are coming from problematic backgrounds. Even if you feel maybe they don't belong, in your house. Maybe they don't belong in your school. Maybe they don't belong in your yeshiva. Maybe they don't belong in your community. Let them in anyway. And there's a story about Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Barditcha, one of the great Hasidic masters, who, the way I heard the story, was that he had many people in his house who maybe didn't really deserve to be in his house for all kinds of reasons. And some of the family members and some of his disciples said, these people don't belong here, throw them out. And amongst his responses was, the day will come after 120, said Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Barditcha, when I'll be standing by the gateways of Gan Eden, by the gateways of paradise, and I'll want to enter, and they won't let me in. They won't let me in. Maybe I won't be pious enough. Maybe my deeds won't be righteous enough. And at that moment, I'll ask for a special audience with God, and I'll say, God, can I please enter? Levi Yitzchak, And then I will argue, well, you know how many people came to my house at Levi Yitzchak who didn't deserve to come into my house? I let all those people into my home. Can't you please let me into your home? And at that moment, God will open the gateways of Gan Eden. Maybe instead of throwing out Yiftach from our homes and from our families and from our communities, maybe we have to appreciate each Yiftach and build them to the highest level. Through that, all the gateways of Gan Eden will be open to everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Shalom. Just in response to that question of an example, I mentioned that I encountered this many times in my own life. I would like to cite one example, but there are many. I believe that Rabbi Meir Kahana is a primary example of such a phenomenon, which in a certain sense parallels the story of Yiftach and our Haftarah. I lived in the United States when Rabbi Kahana was the leader of a movement called the Jewish Defense League. I'm sure it's known to many people, the JDL. Now, I'm not going to now discuss the philosophy and the politics of Rabbi Kahana. There's a time for that, but this is not what I'm speaking about today. What I do want to mention is that I saw on numerous occasions, Rav Kahana was ostracized, Rav Kahana was condemned, Rav Kahana was banned by so many communities, by so many congregations, by so many Jewish institutions, by so many religious institutions. And their main claim to Rabbi Kahana, or about Rabbi Kahana, was, what you're doing is contrary to Jewish tradition, what you're doing is contrary to the way Jews behave. And what fascinated me, confused me, and intrigued me is that on so many occasions, the first person that was called when a Jewish community had a problem, where they were suffering from some kind of anti-Semitic attack, whether it was people being beaten in the streets, or people being thrown, rocks being thrown at them, or cursed, or attacked, or Jewish cemeteries being overturned, or Jewish students not having rights on campuses. The first person that was called was Rav Kahana. And I don't know if he said it, but I thought, what do you mean, Rav Kahana? What are you coming to Rabbi Kahana for? You said that Rabbi Kahana's methods are psulim. These are not the Jewish ways of doing things. And that's what Yiftach said. Hello, atem snei temoti, but garshuni. You don't agree with my methodology. You don't like me. You hate me, and you threw me out. Umadua batem elai ata kasher tsar lachem. So why is it now that you're in distress, now you come to me? And I don't know the exact name. I don't know the exact pronunciation. I think it was pronounced something like Chayis. Is that right? The Chayis squad. Maybe it's some form of pronunciation of Chayot. Is that correct? Yeah. So I think it was called the Chayis squad. I don't know much about the Chayis squad, but these were people who knew how to properly or improperly, depending on your understanding of things, they knew how to defend Jews. Now, I have nothing against. I'm sure many of the Chayot squad people maybe are studying our Parshat and Haftarah together. I have nothing, God forbid, against any of them. But some of them, maybe, to some people, would be similar to the kind of people that our Haftarah records as having joined together with Yiftach. In sentence 3 of our Haftarah, it says that Vayitlakatu el Yiftach anashim rekim. Anashim rekim. I don't know what rekim. I don't know, boorish, empty-headed. God forbid, I'm not saying this about the Chayot squad. I'm sure many of the top scholars, and the most pious people in the world. But there were people who thought, who are these? This is a Jewish organization. Chayot squad, Chayot squad, Anashim Rekim. These are the people that are hanging out with Yiftach. And I saw it myself. I really saw it, and I think Rav Kahana spoke about this on many occasions. Why are you turning to me? I'm not the answer. You have other answers. You say that I'm not doing it the right way. So regardless of what you feel about Rav Kahana's philosophy and political stance, I think that's an example. I think that's an example that of someone who was chased out of a community, who was not allowed to express his views, was not allowed to teach, was not allowed to share his ideas because his ideas were outrageous. His ideas were outlandish, were totally, ridiculous to many people. And yet, when push came to shove, it was Yiftach who was going to be there to lead the people in their battle against Ammon. And on many, many occasions, it was Rav Kahana who stood up and figured out different ways to stop anti-Semitic actions in the communities. I think that Yiftach, the stories, as I said before, this happens over and over and over again. We have to be very, very careful how we treat each person that we view as Yiftach in our lives.